I have a kind of a folk art woodpecker, and it's because I wanted to talk about Leonardo da Vinci and how the most brilliant minds have always learned and been inspired so much by nature and observation. So in the margins of one of Da Vinci's notebooks, he wrote, "Why is a woodpecker's tongue so long?" And being curious, he had found a dead woodpecker and he opened it up. And what he found is this. First off, you have to know that now we can measure the intensity of a woodpecker's pecking. And if you've ever had them come on your drain pipe when you want to sleep in the morning, you know how intense their pecking is, right? And what was fantastic is he found that, there's the crested feathers, the bony skull, and the brain, but in between was an empty chamber. So what happens is that the woodpecker, when it goes to peck so intensely that we now calculated 1,000 Gs of force. So it's really an intense thing. What would happen would be like a football player, the brain would be slamming up against the bony structure and cause damage. But what has involved is that the woodpecker swallows its long tongue and it actually curls around the entire brain and cushions it so that the impact is totally benign. And so we finished that with Einstein's quote, "God does not play dice with the universe." That there is such incredible interwoven, interdependent, harmonic relationship between sound and color and a species. And in many ways, what we're seeing now with COVID is very much related to climate change issues and our actually, treading on wild animal domain. And it is said that now, this is from epidemiologists, that 75% of all the emerging kind of pandemic-like viruses that can skip from, that 75% of them have their origin in animals. That's the leap that it makes to us. So we're in this amazing time. And I don't know, I have for the first time like this golden hawk that made a nest right next to me. And I live in the woods, but I've always fed my foxes, but like they're like inordinately tame right now. They're coming up, and I just feel like the air, my friend who has lived for 40 years in Lower East Side Manhattan, she said she went out on her little balcony because she saw this adorable kind of little colorful hawkish bird. I think it's called a questel. And she went out to look and she said she could smell the ocean for the first time in her memory from the Lower East Side, New York. And so we also have teenagers in Beijing, who are saying they have never seen a starry sky before their own closed down. And the skies from this horribly polluted major city in our world cleared to the point where they had seen stars for the first time. Now, it's not all rosy with the shutdown, but it shows collectively that we have the will to shift the kind of way we live. And I think that's great. The other thing I wanted to really like kind of share with you is this pareidolia. I don't know if Mary McCoy is on, but she's a wonderful artist who lives close and is such an obvious appreciator of nature. And I had the privilege of meeting her when I lectured in Easton a few months ago. And she also is so attuned to forms. I said, "Oh, come up and see, The Secret Life of Earth," because a woman named Pat Bernstein was not an artist, but she was really creative. She did this amazing thing I always admired, where she paired CEOs to with urban kids who had gotten into trouble for their first time, but were like really good kids. And she would pair them for 3 days bicycle trips together across Maryland, knowing that if they did that, that the life of the CEO would be really impacted, but the child would have a true friend, you know, um, and that it would build this partnership that would last. So what happened is she had a brain tumor. And when Pat had that brain tumor removed, thank God it was benign, but it was quite invasive. After she recovered, she's very sporty, so she wanted to get outside again. But for the first time, she felt the woods totally hug her. She had never, in all the time she would go to work, she had never had an experience like that. And then she started seeing faces in the gnarls of tree trunks and everything. And so she asked me to come look at these photographs she had taken and asked me what I saw. And of course, I love that stuff. And I said, oh, I really want to put your work in our Secret Life of Earth show because I see this therapeutic value in this. And she's now working at the VA and with kids and everything, but she didn't know much about pareidolia. And it's when you see up in the clouds shapes that look like something else, or even in linoleum or woodwork in your cabin where as a little kid, you were often more attuned to make figurative things. But I introduced her to Brian Pardini, also featured in the show, who for 30 years, he lives right on a treehouse he built kind of over the shore of Lake Erie. And he, I see my board chairman just chair, I'll get him later. So what he's done is he, like a meditation, walks on the shore and he sees these amazing bits of driftwood and things that look exactly like something else. So, this delight, it's another way to get people of all ages to unplug, or not just like be in nature to walk fast or lose weight or whatever. It's a way of slowing down and really looking. And I think that's been the greatest blessing of this time, where we've had to slow down and, kind of remember who we are when we're not so busy. So did you want to open it up to any questions? Are we good?
Oh, Mariah, do you, and any of us, really, we're all individually muted, but if you can unmute yourself, if you have questions or want to just kind of raise a hand and we can unmute you.
You want to tell them where the unmute is in case they're not used to it?
Oh, yeah. So, on my screen, it's down on the bottom left. I know one of the ladies earlier said on her iPad, it was up or on the bottom right or top left. So kind of if you move your mouse around, I have things that appear that are not normally on my screen when someone's talking. And so on the bottom left of your picture, you might see a little red microphone with a slash through it, and that shows that you're muted. And then I go down to the bottom of my screen, and when I click the microphone, or unmutes me.
I wanted to say also, one of my dear friends who's so close to nature, she's a raccoon rescuer, she's a landscaper. She has a very good science mind coming from, a dad who was such a stupendous scientist. But I just love the way she lives. She lives in what had been a smokehouse in the middle of Chestertown. This is Drums. And, and she's a very, she lives creatively, And I saw on her bookshelf that she had this porcelain bird, and it was exactly the same size as a bird skeleton. And they were like looking at each other, like an avian version of Alas Poor Yorick. I knew him well. So I said, so as you come up and you hear the entire history of the invention and how quickly in just 70 years, they now say that there's no baby that's born, that if you didn't cut and look at the caudal blood before they've eaten anything or whatever, you wouldn't see little micro bits of plastic microscopic plastic. We have really changed, and now they think that a lot of the dementia is exasperated because the particles, the microplastic can get so small that it can pass the blood-brain barrier. So what we do to nature, we quite frankly do to ourselves. And it's, the show has, a lot of humor and stuff in it because as Oscar Wilde said, if you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh or else they'll kill you. But I really can't wait for you all to come. And there we have two of our best shows. We'll still have up on Friday the 13th. You can't make this stuff up. March 13th. The New York Times did an incredible review of our Esther and the Dream of One Loving Human Family exhibition in an article on refugees, where the man came, he's a writer for the Times, and he just came with his kids who hate museums because he drags them to them all the time. And he said he couldn't get his kids out of our museum, so that was lovely. But he also said, that his interest is refugees, and he couldn't believe how we had nailed all the issues to do with othering human beings. So when you come, put a good time, because there's so much to see in both exhibitions that are on the same floor, the second floor, etc. So
we look forward to that. Thank you.
Meredith,
I noticed you're unmuted. Did you have a comment? Or no?
Well, sure. I'll say that I think this is a wonderful program. I was invited by a friend of mine who's here, and I'm learning a lot. And what I really didn't know what pareidolia was, so I looked it up. I'm like, aha. And I think it's so joyful. I have a tree when you come in our driveway, and it looks like somebody upside down, just kind of doing a handstand. And I remember once thinking I was going to spray paint the crotch area, something crazy. It's a joke. I didn't do that. Maybe too much. But I really, really do enjoy that. I think it's a simple joy, and it's fun to figure things out. And I notice things in nature like that often. I don't have any pictures. And I also think I didn't know about this exhibition, but I'm a member of a garden club and Master Gardeners and Conservation Conscious. And so I'm very happy to be here today to publicize this to that large community that is all around Baltimore. I think they would love to come and see the exhibit in its own right, but particularly with the content. So be happy to try to publicize that. So
do you know Carolyn Stewart? She used to be involved with St. George's Club, and she became a reverend late in life of Episcopal Church, and it brought her to tears. It's really beautiful, I have to say, and it gathers kind of the wisdom from so many people, including Native American, but the quotes. I wanted to read you all a quote from Yeats. One second, because I have it up on as like a header, and it says, "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." In past exhibitions, I'm always going back to how nature works, and in fact, many years ago, I was writing a book, and the co-author passed away, but he had written the book, The Secret Life of Plants. And that was a best-selling book in the 70s. It's fantastic reading. And we bring up the experiment that the inventor of the lie detector, who was very, very respected by police even early on in that, his name is Cleve Baxter. And they were stumped by a woman's murder, and the police, Cleve was looking at responses from non-humans to see how sensitive they were, and he concluded that plants actually do respond, and he was picking up all this micro stuff. So police, had such respect for Cleve, they said, well, let's go and take all the plants that were in her apartment, the murder victim's apartment at the time of her murder, and let's parade our 7 or 8, suspects one at a time through. And only with one of them, they did the equivalent, the plants did the equivalent of screaming. It's just, you know, these little things. We have a book, there's the work that you think are beautiful, like seashells or something, you know, it's something beachy. And it's there's this man who lives, it's actually a physician who lives in Hawaii, and he's written a book on sand. And it turns out that sand is like a human thumbprint, in that every beach, even though the water changes it, is still characteristic of only itself. So if you kill your wife in Northern California and you drag her body into the water and she washes up down in the Gulf of Mexico, if she got a little bit of the sand from Northern California up her gazoots at that thing, you can say, aha, she was dumped up there. That's how precise a marker sand is. Each beach of the world has been logged for what it is, and you know, some are pink, etc. But his photographs show you, it's almost like what is that? It's called a holographic aspect, in that down to the level of what we just see as a grain of sand, it retains something of the creature it came from, like the swirl or whatever at the micro level. And I always just thought sand was like ground up, you know, seashells and rocks and stuff. And then you see, oh my gosh, it remembers what it came from. So there's so much great stuff in this. I'd rather you just go through your own pace and enjoy it. But there's also this woman named Nina Montenegro, who noticed that the human thumbprint with the rings of a tree could be juxtaposed, and they look like the swirls are almost identical. It's really a moving thing. And then, of course, I'm a big freak for the Paulownia tree, the sacred tree of the Shinto religion, and China and Japan, because when we pull them out, it's like, oh, they're weed trees. No, but there are 37 varieties. One is considered not so good, but the rest are like, they consume, this is like my favorite part, they consume 11 times more carbon dioxide than any other tree. And they can grow like a miracle 5 to 20 feet in the first year of their life. They have very big kind of elephant-like leaves in the early time. The leaves have so much protein in them they can be fed to cattle. And if you let them fall on the ground, they will actually rejuvenate denuded land. I mean, it's just like, this is the little tree who can't, who could, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. So there's the World Tree Organization that will send you cuttings and instructions. And it's also as light as balsam, but 3 times stronger than heart pine. I mean, it's like, could one thing do so much good, right? So you'll see some carvings by someone who knew nothing of that, named Abraham Lincoln Chris, who carved in the root is always a heart, and they're naturally insect resistant. So it's, I think, if you, let's back up, because our memory has been short. We're all in COVID, right? But what happened else that was significant earlier this year, in the past 12 months? We saw those horrific, and very wild that it was Paradise, California, that got so hit. Horrific, in a lightning flash, forest fires. So that's the first thing you're going to see, is a video from my friends at Goddard Space Flight Institute of the smoke. It's a satellite picture of the smoke from the forest fires in California. And what is mind-boggling is you can see that they actually travel thousands of miles, the smoke does. I thought it would, disperse, would be bad, a couple 100 miles maybe, but not thousands of miles. Then you see the beige of the Sahara sands go all the way across through the Bahamas, which messes up their cars and stuff, this reddish, dust, but it gives nutrients to the rainforests in South America. So, you get a feeling that it is absolutely one atmosphere, whether it's Brazilian's fires, Australia's terrible. I mean, who could have ever imagined what happened on the scale of what happened to Australia this year? So we're getting a lot of messages about our existence with nature and all the elements, water, etc. But I really, I try to do things that will enchant a 3-year-old as well as make a Nobel laureate go, oh my God, and I'm really excited for you all to see it.
Rebecca, this is Nancy. I wanted to ask if you've come across a book called Thus Spoke the Plant.
No.
It was written by a scientist, and I'm desperately trying to remember her name right now. Kind of like a Carlos Castaneda experience, if you remember from the 70s, but
Yeah.
It's her exploration connecting with the plant world, with a different experience around the world.
Is it a contemporary book or is
Pardon me?
Is it an older book or a contemporary?
No, it's relatively new. I think in the
lovely.
last 2 or 3 years. I'll email you the information on it. Yeah.
Oh,
I just
wonderful.
read it and it was really interesting. I think you would really enjoy it. And I have to ask a personal question, if you don't mind. We live in a woodland too, and we love seeing the foxes. What do you feed your foxes?
I tell you what their favorite food is, okay? If you get like sliced salmon or gravlax or anything like that, thin, and I don't like the brown part, like so I'm always like cutting that out with a sharp knife, or you forget that it's in the back of the refrigerator and it gets funky. Rancid lox is like crack for them. I'm telling you. So.
Well, we have a specific tree in view of the kitchen window where if we have ribs or something, I will put the bones from those ribs out there, and I always hope to see who comes and gets them. And they always disappear, but dang, if I don't usually miss who gets them. So I don't know if it's the raccoon or the foxes, but I'll remember the salmon skin for the foxes. That's great.
Yeah, the salmon skin they love too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, gotta think like them,
Yeah.
And I can call my crows too. And my father lived to be 100 and was adorable. He was continent to the last day. He was ramrod straight. He was funny. He did his own checks. He really was something. But he had a pet groundhog that he could call at the end of the day, and they would lumber over from so far. You'd see them running to his suburban house and then go on the porch, and he would put his things there, and then they'd sit up, and they're dexterous, much kind of like raccoons, and then they would eat, and as they chew, their whole forehead really goes over with every bite, and it was amazing. And so he assumed he called him Joey. It was and then one day he notices Joey has breast, and so he thought, well, Joey can go either way. And then she was gone for a while, and then she came back with her little kids who were not babies then, but little, and he put out food, and they're trying to like nurse on her while she's trying to eat, and she takes the back of her hand and she hits them, and like balls, they roll off the court. It's kind of like, if mother doesn't survive, what does. It was really funny. So I if you have dogs or whatever, you realize that there are things that they do better than we do. I follow all the British studies on dogs who have been raised to smell cancer, and the dogs were like 98% correct in a 5-year study, and then they went back and looked at the 2% which they said these people don't have cancer, and all of those people had developed cancer. So before our instrumentation could perceive it, dogs really were accurate. They could tell micro changes. And I have a daughter who's diabetic, and her golden retriever / chow has twice saved her life, broken her up. from coma, so I have to say, I know how dark it is right now, and I hate all the suffering, and I see a lot more will come. But I feel that, well, first off, you have to know, I almost didn't do the museum. I have like no life. I've had only one vacation in 25 years. I didn't take salary for 15. I thought like, and now now I have a nice salary, but I forgot I would get old. I'm going to be 68, and I was like, uh-oh, so it's been, this real passion for a long time. And I was hoping, actually, I might even get to retire, because I've been waiting 36 years to write my play, because I love science, on Nikola Tesla and his best friend, Mark Twain. But I never quite knew how to finish it. I saw everything else literally 36 years ago. And I went down to the Casey Institute to borrow a painting of Ingo Swann's. And I became friends with the director. And he said, well, that Nikola Tesla had 18 private readings with Casey. I said, no, I had never heard that. I knew Casey would give readings to presidents and things. He was well thought of. And he said, yeah. Tesla came to him when he was brokenhearted, that he had invented so many things to bless humanity. And again, it was either classified for its weaponry potential, or because it would have taken us off of fossil fuel. And but the reading from Casey, this is great, was that it is true, for 100 years, the world belongs to them. This is 1925. But after that, the world, 100 years, will be yours. Meaning he wouldn't be alive to see it, but that we would at last. So that's very close. So I am always collecting inventors and bringing them to the museum to speak. And some of them are quite well known. Some are Nobels. But I'm also very interested in kind of real cutting edge technology to better our world. It's another form of visionary intuitive thinking. The great Henri Poincaré of the Science Institute in France said, it is through intuition we discover, and through science we prove. So our museum was founded on the belief that intuitive intelligence is the single common evolutionary thought, because you're not just learning at the knee of someone and spouting it back. It's the only thing that gives us a forward way of evolving as, a humanity. And so I'm very, I've been advocating, let's back up and say Maryland is the epicenter, arguably in the whole world, and this is in the current show too, for creative intelligence applied to weaponry. And I'm not demonizing that, but it has always been. Army chemical warfare was founded in, up in Edgewood Arsenal. Army biological warfare, decades, headquartered up in, that's where that anthrax that got loose from a guy who was a disgruntled scientist, up in Frederick. We have JPL, APL, so many things here. Can you imagine, with the amount of virologists that have worked in biological warfare for years, why isn't the order being given to them to make COVID a top priority? They already have so much background in this, so I'm advocating, weapons into plowshares, because we disproportionately fund the defense industry. I mean, way disproportionate. And I think so many of the well-intentioned scientists and great minds that work there would love the opportunity to be, to say, hey, these are the 2 or 3 things that have been classified that we know could bless humanity. We want permission to, and some things have to be kept, I'm not naive about that, classified, but my gosh, from what I understand, there are so many breakthroughs. And any of us who've taken the train to New York, I mean, it's like the same crappy train that my 100-year-old parents took when they were young adults. Something doesn't seem right. So the Secret Life of Earth, we did that in actually the Great Mystery Show. We questioned how in the world you could have the first manned flight in 1903, which went 120 feet. First manned flight, Wright brothers. 8 years later, they were able to make it all the way across America. 8 more years, they made it all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. And in 66 years, from barely getting 120 feet off the ground, they were walking on the moon. When I look at our systems of transportation, something doesn't add up. It's, because the speed of you're looking at each other. Have you been having that discussion too? Oh.
No, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, because I'm Sandra, and I live in a retirement community now where we are very conscribed. I would say imprisoned, but that's not the right word. We live in cottages, we can have gardens, we can walk in the area. I will want to be able to translate what you are saying about the connection between humans, us, as we struggle in these periods with the science, with the beauty of nature, with the inspiration, and make that connection between art and nature through an intuitive way, through a visual way, through all the senses. And so I'd like to, in addition to your beautiful technical and scientific explanations, I want to ask you how we can translate the beauty of nature, as limited as we see it here, to children, to our art community in so many different ways. I started with we won't be in a museum for a while. We are on our own for maybe a long time. So how do we connect with the spirituality of nature and combine that with art so that we express our appreciation and
I love what you're
reverence
thinking about.
for
And you
the
have
world.
such beautiful skin. I'm looking at you. You look lovely. I wanted to say the thing that I have found.
I'm much older than you are, so that's a great compliment.
Well, it's true. So what I'm really try to do is not try to teach people, but to draw out so that there's a resonance, right? So I often ask something germane to whatever my theme is to each artist to put in the bio. So it's not like blah, blah. We write very creative bios anyway, because I figure people don't care about the kind of stuff that gets in most art bios. I want people to feel, who is this creature, before them. So I've often asked people in general, what's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? And it makes them kind of go back and figure out what fueled them. And, sometimes it'll be like, oh, my grandson's smile, and stuff, which is nice. But there's a fabulous book called Strange Brains and Genius. And it's a story of all these kind of hardwired a little differently geniuses by a man named Clifford Pickover. It's a great book. And it kind of gives these little vignettes and all these geniuses in all their peculiar little ways. It's kind of like Big Bang Theory, Sheldon before Sheldon. And the thing that I got out of it was how many of them said the greatest teacher in their life was being alone in nature. Because I would say, and I'm not a genius, but I'm saying my alone time in the woods when I was so meaningful to me. and just watching like the mica in the, shimmer. We're lucky to live in Maryland with, the mica like diamond dust, in the,
Yeah.
so if you share with what is most beautiful to you, like I'm a nut for snow. I call it, you know, you can stick out your tongue and kill a snowflake, but they can all get together at night, and the next day even Trump couldn't get out of LaGuardia. You know what I'm saying? It's like the power of gentleness is amazing to me, and I love the way snow smells. I love what it does to the air. I love the silence it makes. So if you can just share, from yourself, and in the joy, what were the times you were happiest? What was your experience in nature? Did you ever have something strange happen with an animal? To just draw people out. Did you ever see a ghost? You have to find ways, and just and then appreciate, in that moment of just really being ready to receive, because I don't want to just like teach to people. I'm trying to blow on the embers of everybody's soul when they come through our show, so that they bring themselves to, they're pouring the exhibition anyway through the filter of themselves. And so I think that now, you all have windows at least. And I think when you're confined, I want to say, that, you are so aware. And we've also lost 30% of the bird life. There's a lot of, in the show we put up the last male white rhino passed away right before we opened. So we have all these factoids, but we're always trying to shift on the default on the line of sharing wonder, because if it's all bad news, you're not going to give people a place for them to
Right.
bona fide be excited. And people, what is beautiful to people, and Louis Schwartzberg says this better than me, is what they will care about and defend. Yeah. So just I get that, and it would be wonderful to see. I'd love to see the responses. I don't know if you're doing email with everybody. Is that how it's working? But throw out the gauntlet of like, what was the most beautiful thing you ever saw in nature? I could tell you what mine was. There were bushes around my parents' suburban home, and there was a spider's web. And there were droplets of rainwater that then the temperature must have fallen quickly. And they all froze on the spider web. And then the sun came out and it looked like diamonds on a necklace, but better. And that to me is still one of like the, oh my gosh, moments. So I'd like to hear from you all about that. How about you? Because you're right here. Have you thought about like what was that one connection you made in nature that has stayed with you?
One of the things that you said earlier was about doing things that you wouldn't have done before you had the time, you had the forced time to do it. And Paul and I went walking just before this meeting, down a pathway within a mile of our home that we've never bothered going down before. I'm not sure if we even knew it was there. And seeing birds.
How long have you been there, first off?
Just almost 2 years now in this house, and 3.5 on the Eastern Shore.
You saw a fox.
Yeah, we were walking down a path and this tiny fox cub was sort of about 15 yards ahead, and he stopped dead as if to say, "What are you on that path? And I don't actually think I like you very much." And then shot off into the woods, and there were birds that we've never seen, and there were tiny seedlings in the field. And we had, I suppose, about an hour of absolute wonder in a place that's on our doorstep that we would actually never have seen had it not been for this. Because if we do choose to go out, it's generally getting into the car and going further afield to something that somebody has said is worth seeing. And I think you can kind of realize that there's a lot that's worth seeing just on your doorstep. We've seen things in our back garden we've never seen before. It's been quite an eye-opener.
Well, to quote Blake, right? To see a world, in a, what was to see a world in a, is it like, what is it? The famous line by Blake, I have it in my show, so I should know. What is the blower thing for, that you, a dandelion? Oh, yeah, the
Through a
wisher.
blade of grass,
In a
right?
blade, right? And I love that you all shared that. Was the fox cub really young? Because when I've seen my fox cubs out there, which is not that often, but they look kind of like almost like German Shepherd puppies. They're not reddish yet; they're more like little brown, and they sit kind of erect. Did it look like that to you, the cub?
He was kind of
I'm not sure.
corgi size, and he had black markings on his face, and
Oh, did he?
yeah, he was just really
I'm
sweet.
not sure how young it was, but he was kind of small.
Yeah.
He didn't have very much of a tail on him yet.
Okay, this is so funny. So I hadn't seen my daughter for like 7 weeks, and she did come over on Sunday, and we had such a wonderful time. And she has a lot of health challenges, so it was such a gift, And when I concentrate, I have like a tunnel thing. It's not something, like my best friend could be next to me or my parent or whatever at the time, and if I'm concentrating on something, I have no idea what anybody said. Like I am like there concentrated, right? And so when I enjoy food, my daughter said to me, she said, you're just like grandpa. And that I make little kind of, happy sounds when I'm eating something with abandon. I don't chew with my mouth open or anything, but I just make a lot of sounds. And I said, I really do. That's terrible. She said, no, Ma, it's kind of cute, but you really do. And this is the thing that's closest. So everybody can look this up and you'll love it. Look up on YouTube. It's called Teddy Bear Porcupine. There's several things of his. And put up your sound loudly. And Teddy Bear Porcupine eats little pumpkins. And he responds to commands. It's really interesting, but the sounds he makes are unlike any other animal. So my daughters, they're actually so loud and funny and sweet at the same time, but it made me roll that my daughter thought that that's what I sound like, So I'm not coming to eat at your houses anytime soon, if that's true. Thank you again for that beautiful, beautiful insight. Anyone else?
Rebecca, you were asking about things that most beautiful sights and things we've seen in nature. And the most memorable, although I've seen so many gorgeous views that are really, it's hard to pick one, but it was maybe 10 years ago. We live in a forest and trails all through the woods. And we had a big snowstorm. It's the day before Thanksgiving, and we'd had about 10 inches of snow. And it was that really, really wet snow. And everything, I went out that morning for an early morning walk, and as you had mentioned earlier, snow, it just absorbs the sound and it makes everything quiet. So I'm walking through the woods and I was scouting, adding a new trail. So I'm kind of paying attention to the trees on either side and what I would be walking by as I pass them, not really looking ahead, but thinking, where would I be right now? And I had this sudden sense that there was something in front of me coming my way, and I looked up and there was an 8-point buck doing pretty much the same thing. And he's just walking right at me. Wow. And he got within probably 4 feet of me. And I thought, and if he bumps me, he may get excited and gore me. I don't know. And so anyhow, I just tried to say in a gentle voice, it's okay. Just get his attention. And he stopped. And he looked up at me and he was as surprised as I was. And what I remember more than anything was his breath in the cold, in that humid cold, just these shafts of steam. Just he looked at me, and then I guess he decided I wasn't a threat. He took 1 step back and 2 or 3 steps to the side, and he just walked right past me. It was just the most
Oh,
beautiful experience, but it's really amazing. It's the one I remember
I
probably.
have chills on that one. Oh, thank you. This is very wonderful kind of sharing. I never like cocktail parties, but when at all, because I really care about dialogue, because for me it is an art how you share yourselves. And years ago, when I was young, they said she looks like a cheerleader, but her first question is to dates, is, so what do you think about death? And indeed, I served on the board of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, as the only woman for a long time, etc. But I love it when there's an art in the noble question that itself opens the door to people. And I hope somebody else will speak to. My God, I love that one. And you with your gorgeous white hair, you must have been, he probably thought you were like the Snow King or something.
Santa Claus, I think he was waiting for a Christmas present.
Well, maybe you should put out there. Is there hunting on your land?
No.
We don't allow it on our property.
Have you ever seen an albino deer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, not on our property, but yes.
But we see kind of what I call the pinto deer, kind of half white, half
I see
brown.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
have several of those.
Yeah, that's called piebald.
Piebald, thank you.
It's like a Dalmatian, which is, we've seen that on our property. And of course, that's a flaw. And so what happens is the other deer, I think, ultimately will shun the poor thing because it's standing out like a sore thumb. It's not camouflaged in any way.
2 summers ago, we had a piebald on the property that I would see occasionally. And a large buck decided that this is my pal. And she was a doe, and he stayed with her. I never saw her without him right next to her all through the summer into early fall, and then they kind of scattered and I didn't see him again. But for a number of months, when I would see her, he was right with her every time. So he obviously didn't, he kind of liked it. He thought she was pretty cool.
Well, some locals have said that trait is a sign of overcrowding, overpopulation, when you start to see those types of deer. But I don't know that it's true. It's just something I've been told.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, thank you so much for being here. I know we've already kept you probably 15 minutes longer than I promised to begin with, but you've been so kind to ask people to share. I don't want to cut off if anyone else has anything they want to share, but thank you so much for your insights. And I want to let everybody know, I normally take a few notes that I share the next day. I've scrawled all over my introduction paper, and I will be happy to email everybody tomorrow. Meredith provided us with one link in the chat to the book, one of the books Rebecca mentioned early on. I've written down a couple other things. So, feel free to email Mariah or I back with any insights or stories that you want to share. We'll share with just this group, but then we'll also share with our larger membership in tomorrow's email a few little tidbits since they weren't here. But it's amazing to be with such a small group and have this kind of conversation. It's been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, dear Anne. I wanted to talk about rivers because you're river art. And, rivers, whether it's, in song, Old Man River, but just in general, the power of a river, of somehow it stays the same, but it's constantly changing at the same time. But what I'm fascinated by, I guess maybe 35 years ago, I read a book, not very well written because it's translated from Swedish, on the life of the inventor Victor Schauberger, who had been a naturalist, a forest ranger in Austria, and anti-Hitler. But there had been a competition to see who could bring, logs quickly down from the side of mountains. And everybody thought, oh, well, straight shoot, that's going to be the fastest way. And Victor Schauberger, having watched water and why streams meander, it's not just the fact that there's a denser rock or whatever. If you think of the sinusoidal curve that how snakes even move, there's something that gathers energy. when in that, almost like the helix of our DNA, you know, why isn't it just a straight, right? Why is it this torqued kind of ladder or lattice? So, you know, Victor Schellberger built these flutes while everybody else had just built these straight, you know, flutes for logging that were sinusoidal curved like this, which are how all logging flutes are to this day. So even though technically the logs would have to travel over more square footage than a straight chute, it actually got them down faster because they pick up energy in that nature's, you know, such great you know, teacher and the greatest artist, you know. So anybody else there? I would love to hear from one more. I don't want, you know, I don't want to stop unless you've all had a chance. You're good? You're hungry?
I'm happy to say that I don't know if I can choose, but so many of the what's already been mentioned comes to mind. I mean, for one, the river. Mary McCoy is my cousin, and she actually lives in the house that I grew up in.
Oh, I've been to your house once. I didn't go inside, yeah. But beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, and so that you know, especially in the old days, growing up there, you know, we didn't have the internet, so it was the river was our what was changing every day and every moment, and what really gave me that connection to those rhythms and those the tides and the movement of life that it changes every second. You know, the sun is on it, and then there's clouds, and there's waves, and it's still, and the fish are jumping out of it. So that comes to my mind. But the snow and the ice, I lived in New England for many years, and I absolutely love that. And I can't, maybe because it's a little exotic to me still, the snow and those magical times of the trees being encased in ice with the sun glinting off of every tiny twig. You know, it makes you lose your breath. But I would also say that the everyday things that we see, you know, in the sky and the trees as they're moving in the breeze, all every one of them has a certain scale at which you can both see other things within it, and also it's beautiful in a way that nothing else is. And so I just really appreciate your drawing our attention to those moments and those tiny glimpses of something that's both kind of tiny and enormous at the same time, and has the power to spark those inventive, creative insights that you were talking about. So thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate it.
And the smells too, you know, like honeysuckle. For me, honeysuckle is like, oh my gosh. And, you know, I used to always pick violets for my mom, who's been gone 10 years now. And my lawn is almost all moss because I live in the woods. There's not, you know, grass grows very slowly. And I have like it's gone, it's kind of over now, but it was all violets. It was really amazing. And I feel like that's her coming through, you know. And I think many of us also look to birds and experiences with people we've loved and lost, where we will feel like, oh, I think that bird who is not acting normally is inordinately friendly. Is that, you know, is that someone we loved, you know, or something, you know. So thank you all for such a nice time to be with you, and keep, you know, feasting on that beauty in a time, because no one needs our extra despair, you know. And I wish I could come visit you. Is it Sandy at her at the nursing home? Uh, you know, but I bet, I don't know. I hope that she
Sandra,
inspire a
yes.
lot of people.
Sandra is
Sandra,
one of our board members.
oh yeah, she is beautiful in every way. So I'm hoping, I'd like to hear more stories again about what, you know, remember museums began as Cabinet of Wonders. Cabinets, this was their name, and it was a result of discovery. And there were two kinds of museums that exist to this day: things made by the hand of human beings, and things made, natural history museums of the divine, right? That's always been the same stuff. And I don't know, I could really be a hermit pretty easily, believe it or not. But it has been a great non-hermit experience to be with you all today. So, Anne, Nancy, thank you so much for inviting me and for being there. And I look so forward to being together.
Thank you.
We look forward to October, Rebecca.
This was
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Nancy, thank you for making the connection in the introduction to Rebecca, and for us to Rebecca. It's been a delight, and we can't wait till that trip.
I have to say, keep us in your prayers, because, you know, we're debt free, because I believe like clean underwear. If I had a stroke tonight, I didn't want, you know, anything bad, but we depend, we have the smallest budget of all 13 cultural majors that are funded at all with the state of Maryland, but we have the smallest amount of funding. So we earn 2.5 times the national average of earned income through over 100 weddings we do every year, and all these corporate events. So I really care about staying debt-free, because I've never been late on a paycheck before this or anything. And now we have already lost $700,000 of rentals already, and I think it's going to be quite a bit more. And we only have we have the smallest budget, $3 million a year, and yet there are 7 national lists, from Oprah's destinations to U.S. News and World Report, and we are it for the state of Maryland every time. And you know, I'm not sleeping around or something. You know, like it's like these people really have chosen us to represent Maryland, but it shouldn't be so hard. You know, so I don't know what's going to be in the plan. I hope that we can evolve to be what we've already been in practice, of a visionary think tank on creative solutions going forward. And so in addition to what we do.